I'm really excited to see some of you whom I recognize and some people whose names I don't recognize. So welcome. We're so excited to have you at this recruitment event so we can let you know a little bit more about our HDFS programs at Utah State University for graduate students. Let you know some insider tips about the application process to take some of the mystery away and answer your questions about our program specifically and your questions about applying to graduate programs. As questions come up, please feel free to put them into the group chat, and I will be moderating today, and I will ask Dr. Fouth some of the questions that come up. So that'll be how we handle that. I didn't introduce myself. My name is Dr. Diana Meader. I'm an assistant professor in the Human Development and Family Studies program. I study peer relations, victimization, discrimination among adolescents, and we're really excited to have you here. And now I would like to introduce Dr. Beth Fouth. She is an associate professor in the HDFS program. She's been at Utah State University for a pretty long time and so knows a lot about our department, the programs, living in Logan, Utah. She's also the graduate coordinator for the HDFS department, which means she's the go-to person for questions about graduate programs in our department and continues to be a mentor and guide for our current graduate students. So I will now turn it over to Beth. And remember, if you have any questions, please put them in the text box. I will make sure to make sure Beth knows about those questions and can answer them.
Awesome, thank you. I'm excited to have you guys here. So, you know, this is a weird year and normally we do this face-to-face and we get to know each other a little bit better, but it's 2020, so we're doing what we can do. You know, that being said too, this is a Zoom thing and we've all sat on a lot of Zoom calls and it gets pretty dull if it's just me talking the whole time. So I really didn't want this to be a presentation. I kind of wanted it to be more of a discussion and a Q&A. So please participate, you know, we'll engage people through the text, but you know, we can have a chat too if it seems like we can answer your question better through a discussion. So yeah, so I am a associate professor at Utah State. My research area is in aging and gerontology. Particularly like to look at people with dementia and how to help improve their quality of life and also how to work with their caregivers, their family members who are caring with them to try to reduce their stress. So do that through both kind of intervention research, but also basic research. So we'll move to the presentation. And, you know, as always with Zoom, let me know if there's any glitches because there usually is, and I don't always know about them. So keep me posted. And Diana, I'm not going to be able to have the chat open, so just jump in, unmute yourself and interrupt me if you need to, okay? Okay, so I recognize a few faces. I know we've got some people here from Logan, Utah, so I don't need to spend a ton of time on this, but I also know there's some of you that are not from here and you may have no idea where Logan, Utah is. So we are here, we're at the very top, which is 20 minutes away or so from Idaho. Utah State University is a public land grant university. So what that means is, you know, we have both sort of teaching and research as part of our agenda. We also work a lot with extension, and I'll talk a little bit about that because that is actually a pretty important employer of our graduate program. But it's a large university with undergrads and about 3,000 grad students. We have lots and lots of things to brag about as a university, as a college, and as a department. These are just some facts and figures that kind of came out so that you would believe me, and it wasn't just me bragging. But you know, things like being ranked number 5 public university in the nation, we're the number 6 college for education and human services. And then if you didn't know already, we are the Aggies, and our mascot is Big Blue, who freaks out all little children when he gets close at the stadium. Okay, other fantastic things, if you didn't know, sort of the best parts about living in Logan are not just the university, but we have lots of things to brag about, right? It's a relatively safe community. It's a college town, and it's ranked, in 2014 was ranked in the top 10. Lots of beautiful recreation with Bear Lake, Logan Canyon, Beaver Mountain, all sorts of things to do here. So in fact, when I came to Utah State, I didn't know I was going to stay, and it was really the community and the recreation that kept me here. It's an absolutely beautiful place to live. If you are trying to consider where to live in Utah, so you're already convinced that Utah is the place, here is from 2019 article from KUTV that said Logan is the best city to live in and Salt Lake is the worst. So come here. Okay, so I field a lot of questions in sort of what is HDFS? Like, why would I go to an HDFS program and not psychology or sociology or social work or some of these related fields? So there isn't a perfect answer for that. There's a lot of overlap between HDFS and other majors, but I wanted to kind of go over that quickly in case some of you are having this debate about whether I should go to this kind of program or this kind of program. So in HDFS, we're basically studying, human development and family, so couple family relationships. We are a very interdisciplinary discipline. So we have our foundation in all sorts of different disciplines. We probably overlap the most with developmental psychology, but there's lots of different influences. So you will see research and you will see faculty that have overlap with lots of different fields. Some of our faculty could easily be in an education department. Some of ours could be in a psychology department. So we are kind of a nice marriage between lots of different disciplines. And what that does is it influences the way that we, the way we approach teaching and research in this area. So when you're trying to decide where you should go, I think there are some really important considerations to make. I had to make these decisions myself. If you're somebody that feels like you're very strongly drawn towards a certain age group, like you really love working with early childhood or you love working with adolescents, or in my case, I knew I loved working with older adults, that may kind of guide you to say, this is a good program because we are going to specialize in specific life areas or phases of the lifespan, if you're kind of interested in human development. If you are interested in prevention or intervention research, human development in family studies is very much kind of embraces that. So when we can study things from kind of a basic perspective, how is this variable related to this? But you'll see a lot of work in our department and a lot of the education, a lot of the coursework is going to be focused on prevention. So let's do, what can we do? Can we do family life education to improve outcomes or prevent outcomes? So it's a little bit different from, let's say, therapy or social work, which tends to catch families or individuals in the sort of a crisis mode or they're really needing an intervention in a significant way. We're a little bit more on the prevention sciences side of sort of the continuum, but we also do work with intervention as well. So one question I think to ask yourself is, to what degree do you want to work with clients? If you really see yourself in a face-to-face environment with, in a therapeutic setting, sitting across from somebody, that's not what our MS and PhD are going to get you. We are not a clinical degree. We'll talk about that in a second. We do have a clinical degree in our department. If you find that if you think, I really would love to do that kind of thing, but I don't know if I could sit and be a therapist all day long and, hear sort of the difficulties that people are going through. There's other ways to help, right? You don't always have to go the therapy route to do, to really make an impact on families. Diana, do you want to add anything here? I think just, sort of in terms of like why HDFS versus other programs or other departments?
Sure. I got my undergraduate degree in psychology and loved that degree, but did my graduate work in human development and family studies and wasn't entirely sure what that was at the time. But one thing that I loved about it is that the theories and the types of research, the research methods, all of that comes from different fields. And the idea of being interdisciplinary and working with different collaborators and getting new ideas from people with different backgrounds and experiences in the community and in the university, that was encouraged, that was expected. And so I love a focus on collaborative work and using the methods and the ideas that are going to best serve the research or serve your sample or population rather than just staying siloed within one field. So that's one thing that I think is really special about human development and family studies.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And if you, again, if you in the audience have questions like, what's the difference between this and this, let us know. We might be able to answer it. We'll certainly try. Okay, so our department is part of a college. It's the Emmett Eccles Jones College of Education and Human Services. It's the largest college at the university. We have tons of resources at the college level. We're really lucky to be a part of such a powerhouse college. And there's a list here of the other departments that you'll see in the college. We collaborate really well. So lots of projects that happen, I think, from collaboration. I just met this morning to work on a project with some researchers in kinesiology and health sciences. I've worked a lot with people in psychology. So we play very well. We're not a super siloed college. We do a lot of cross-pollination between the disciplines, which is nice. So you could take classes, courses in any of these departments if that was something interested in you. And we can talk a little bit more about what some of those could be, or we could help you find those. Probably what you're here for, though, is that you're thinking at least pretty strongly about HDFS. So what are the degrees that we have? We have 4. We have a Master of Science. That means it involves a thesis. We have a Master of Family and Human Development, which is a non-thesis, and I'll explain these in a little bit more detail. We have a Master of Marriage and Family Therapy. That's a clinical degree. And we have a PhD. So the non-thesis master's degrees, I'm not going to focus on a lot today, and I'll explain why. So the MFHD, that's a Master's in Family and Human Development. We typically do not admit students into this program. This is a degree that's on the books, and there are certainly students that graduate with it, but this is something that we tend to use if there's a Master of Science student who's admitted into the program and decides that because of their career interests or their area of interest that they are better suited to do a project instead of a thesis, then the student could be approved to switch into this. But it's really only used in very typically pretty specific scenarios. So most of the time, these are students that are working in the child development lab, and instead of doing a research thesis, they do a lot of background research and then plan some kind of curriculum for the lab. And so again, it's kind of a project-based option. So if you're thinking, I want to go to grad school and I want to get a master's degree, but I don't want to do a thesis, we are unlikely to accept you into this program. I guess that we could have a conversation ahead of time and talk about it. There may be some exceptions, but I can say we have not admitted somebody into this program for years. We have graduated maybe one person a year at most that switch into this program. The MMFT, the Master's in Marriage and Family Therapy, is a clinical degree. So that's a degree that trains you to be a marriage and family therapist. And they have a separate admissions process. And so again, I'm not going to talk about that today because they follow a little bit different structure, and they are accredited by the AAMFT. And so they have to follow specific rules in terms of like admission and their program. And so you will need to contact them directly if you need more information specifically about that program. And again, the link is in the chat for the Zoom call. One thing you can do, which is kind of interesting, is you can do a thesis. So you can get an MS, a Master of Science, and specialize in MFT. So in that case, you would still be applying through the MFT application process. But if you felt like you wanted to get both a clinical degree and do a thesis, you can do that. So when you see, like when we're talking about the different specializations for the MS, you'll see that MFT is an option. But again, that's only an option for students admitted into the clinical program. Okay, the Master of Science is a 2-year degree. Typically, students are doing 2 to 3 classes at a time. Classes are usually in 3-hour blocks. But we could talk a little bit about sort of the timeline. You are set up to complete the degree in 2 years. There are students that extend that for one reason or another, for family reasons or for personal reasons. They take 2.5 years or they take 3 years, but the program is designed to be a 2-year completion. In this program, the student does pay tuition. I have the tuition rates link posted in the chat. And again, that will change from year to year. That can go up based on Utah State. We do have some cool things you can do to kind of earn money while you're getting the degree. You could work as a teaching, most of our students do this, by the way, very few opt out of this. Most of our MS students work as a teaching assistant or a research assistant for the department. And so our department commits to supporting Masters of Science students in their first year. Most students also get covered in their second year. We can't guarantee that because budgets change from year to year, but we commit to covering you as much as possible. So what that means is if you wanted to work for the department, usually as a TA, the department will pay you for your time. So it pays around $19 an hour. And again, that can change from year to year, but it's stayed pretty close to that over the last few years. In that TA, you would be, assisting our faculty and teaching a class. So it's 10 hours a week, but it's kind of a fun 10 hours a week. It's working with students, working with undergraduate students, and you guys have had TAs, so you know a little bit about what they do. If you're an out-of-state student and you want to get the in-state tuition, you can do that by having a 15 to 20 hour assistantship. So you basically can jump down into the bracket of tuition for in-state if you have an assistantship with our department. We also offer health insurance for our students. So when you look at the way our master's degree is set up, we have distinct specializations. So you would take 9, so just under a third of your credits would be in your specialization. And those are marriage and family relationships, infancy and childhood, adolescence and youth, adult development and aging, and family finance. Remember, there's also MFT, but that's only for students that are admitted into the MFT program. So for the most part, our students are sharing some of the same background classes. They're getting classes in human development and family studies theories. They're getting trained in introductory research methods. They're taking like electives that are kind of specific to their interest area, as well as, some other courses sort of that are related. So for example, a student might take some classes in parenting and early childhood and cultural diversity. Those are the kinds of classes that we have. If you're looking specifically for our classes, go to the website and type in the degree, go to the website, go to grad studies, and then look at the different degrees like Master of Science. Click on that. You can see our coursework, our options for students, and you can see kind of the diversity of classes that we have. Okay, so why would you get a Master of Science? We have, I have a list of some of our recent graduates on the side here. There's lots of things you can do with a master's degree, and it gives you some advantage over a bachelor's degree for sure. The kinds of things people go into, things like after school programs, family life education, program development, let's say at a nonprofit, senior centers, assisted living, it depends a little bit on your area of specialization. It's nice because it often gives you a pay grade like increase over a bachelor's degree, and often can allow students entry into administrative positions, which also usually have, benefits and higher pay and, just kind of gains you a little bit more than a Bachelor of Science can gain you. I always have to tell people, when they say, Dr. Fouth, I'm like, I'm not that kind of doctor. It is a doctoral degree, okay? We have 2 options for students. You can go straight from undergrad. We call that the BS to PhD, the Bachelor of Science to PhD. That's a 5-year degree. Or you can come in with an existing master's degree, right? So if you come from another institution and you have an MS, then you can just continue the PhD here for 3 years. So again, it's 5 years total, 2 with your master's, 3 years with your PhD. I just want to talk a little bit about this. So a lot of students say, oh no, I want to get my PhD, so I want to go into the bachelor's to PhD. We admit students into that program if they have had research experience. So if you've done work with an honors thesis, if you've done some kind of significant research with another faculty member, it doesn't have to be an HDFS, but basically you have some documentation of your research experience, then we can admit students into the BS to PhD. If you don't have a lot of research experience, it's just something you think you might want to do, I would encourage you to apply to the MS program and then, get the degree, do your thesis, and then apply to stay for another 3 years. So we've had really good success with students that do that. They come here, they get the thesis, and then they stay for 3 years. So again, it's a 5-year program, same amount of time, but they also get a master's along the way. And what's nice about that too is if you were in the bachelor's to PhD program and something happened like year 3, year 4, you have a family situation change, you need to move, you can't complete the degree, you don't have a degree. But if you have the master's along the way and that happens and you have to leave before the PhD is over, you do walk out with a master's degree. So again, there's pros and cons, and I think I'd be more than happy to talk to people individually about their own, you know, situations and which program they think is a better fit for them. We admit students into both very regularly. So we have both BS to PhD and post MS PhD in most of our incoming classes.
I was just going to add one thing to that, Beth. When you're doing a program like this, a lot of times you're going to focus on a pretty specific research area or you know, area of knowledge you want to develop through the program. And if you have a pretty clear idea of the type of work you want to do while you're a student and when you leave, a BS to PhD might make a little bit more sense. But if you know that you're interested in human development or families more generally, but you don't really know what you want to do exactly, that could be a good indication too, that it might be a good idea to get a master's and learn a little bit more about yourself and your goals and then go through a PhD program.
In addition to the coursework that you do for a PhD, which is more credits than an MS, but again, it's a longer program, you also work on a dissertation, which is your own independent, but very much mentored research experience. I think a lot of times people are like, oh, I don't want to do research, it's really scary. I felt that way. I didn't think I'd ever want to go into research for a field. My suggestion for people is try it, because I think you may not know really what goes into research, and it's actually fascinating. Obviously, I'm biased; it's what I do, but it's just like their occupation. Like if you think you want to work with children, because you may find out like, oh, I like to work on behalf of children, but I don't want to spend every day working with children. Or the same thing with older adults. Research is the same thing. So don't be scared of it. Try it out. Try to work with some faculty members and get a little bit of experience. And you may be surprised. I certainly was. It kind of changed my course for sure.
Beth, we have a couple of questions.
Okay, I was just wondering, as you talked about the PhD option and that primarily students are not admitted into that program unless they already have research experience. But then Diana, you mentioned if you know a specific thing that you would like to do with your graduate studies, that it might be an option. So if I do have that specific idea, but I don't have the undergraduate research, I have a gap in that time frame, would it be advantageous to still apply for a PhD, or are there additional people that I should talk to kind of sort that out?
One thing you could do if you didn't feel like even a conversation with me resolved it, is you could always apply for the PhD, the bachelor's to PhD 5-year program. And if the admissions committee was concerned that you didn't have enough research experience, they could contact you and say, okay, we're not quite really ready to commit to the 5 years without a little bit of research under your belt. So why don't you come for 2 years for the master's and then stay for the 3 years following for a PhD. So we've certainly done that a lot. So, you know, when in doubt, you can certainly apply for the PhD, and we could have a discussion after the fact. Or if you'd rather, we could, you know, you can touch base with me. Diana, will you put my email in the chat?
Sure.
And yeah, we can do a Zoom call, phone call, you know, however you want to set it up. I think those things are sometimes a little bit of a gray area. So we'll definitely come up with something for you though, like a response that makes sense for your given interests and your current situation.
That's awesome. I appreciate it. If I can ask a follow-up question to something else that Diana said about MFT students maybe switching at some point into the PhD program. I looked at both the MFT and the Masters of Science through the department. And if you wanted to do a clinical, would it ever work out to do 2 masters like back to back, or is that something that would be discouraged? So you have the experience with prevention and with couple intervention.
So that is a good question. I don't think we've had a student that's done that. I would almost think you may want to do an MFT master's degree and then a PhD with a concentration in MFT, or actually in anything. You can do the concentration in human development or family studies, only because then the time you've put in for those 2 degrees would be very equivalent to like a PhD. So then you just get a more advanced degree for your time. But I think it's possible. It would definitely be possible to do first one sort of non-thesis and then the other thesis, or sorry, one clinical and then the other clinical. It's possible. I've never had a student do it, but. yeah, let's talk about
Okay, thank you.
questions. Thank you.
I had a question too about with the master's degree. With USU being pretty much only a thesis, my understanding is that's more important if you're going into research, but as far as like careers in like the applied world, like extension and others, would it make much a difference to have a thesis versus not? Like, is that kind of a big thing, or is it more kind of academia research based?
It's a really good question. It's a really good question, honestly. So I'm just going back to this slide. If you look at some of the careers that are here, research isn't going to be the primary focus of those degrees, of those careers. Things like teaching is a good example, or extension. In teaching, you have to understand research and you have to interpret research in order to be able to teach it. So certainly for any kind of teaching position in higher ed, teaching at a community college or being a lecturer, you would have to have a Master of Science. I think the MS as opposed to an MA or another kind of master's would be important. Extension's another good example. So with extension, they're taking research that's happened at a university and they're setting up programs to disseminate to the public based on that research. So again, you don't have to be a particularly independent researcher, but you have to be a really good sort of consumer of research so that you can get it out to the people, in a way that's like sort of that matches what the research found. So an MS is the thesis that you do is not a very intense research project. It's about a semester long and it's a small bite at research. And what it's doing is it's sort of letting you kind of dip your toes in a little bit without really diving in very deep. And that should be enough to help you if you're working in, let's say, human services, could help you write grants, teaching you the process of finding research, kind of working through what's critical in the field, looking at best practices in terms of programs that you would deliver to your senior center or to your, after school program or something like that. So it's a very, very introductory and not an overwhelming amount of research that you'd be doing. So the PhD is the one where you dive in. You dive in pretty deep. You spend a lot of time with it. You really become an expert in your area. I'll go over some of this, but also I would say fairly quickly. We offer assistantships to our PhD students. And what's important to know is if you have a 20-hour assistantship with us, your tuition is waived. So you don't pay tuition out of pocket as a PhD student. So that's a really nice gig, right? So you're working for the department as a TA or RA, you're getting paid for that time for 20 hours, and you're not paying tuition. And so that is something that we do guarantee our PhD students that they will have an assistantship up for a certain amount of time. So if you stay in the PhD program too long, we can't cover you, let's say in your 7th year, we run out of money to be able to cover you. But we do cover you if you are in good standing and you're making progress towards your degree within the typical timeline. So that's a definite plus. Within the PhD, you don't have to decide from the beginning, but at some point you make a decision if you're leaning more towards family relations, human development through the lifespan, or if you have an existing MFT master's degree, you can specialize or have an area of concentration in MFT. And students pick 2. So like most of my students do human development as their major area and then family relations as their minor area. But for all of our PhD students, they're getting education in both areas, like both of their specialty areas. So with a career with a PhD, the career options are heavily research focused. So you're conducting research, you're interpreting it, or you're teaching it. So many of our students, these are some here, you can see the institutions they go to. They do this degree because they want to be a professor. They want to teach and do research. And then some of them want to teach a little bit more. They go towards a more teaching focused position. Like Weber State is a great example. It's a fantastic institution, a little bit heavier focus on teaching than research. Or they go into universities a little bit more like USU, like a balance of teaching and research. So like Montana State, right? The expectations are to do both. You don't have to be a professor. These are some areas that some of our recent graduates have gone into. So they work for, again, human service organizations. They're, often in directorship positions. They can work on sort of nonprofit agencies that are interested in analyzing data or sort of solving problems. So these, again, just kind of a list of the types of jobs that our PhD students have gone into. Okay, so I'm going to pause there because I spent a lot of time about our department. The end of this, the next 15 minutes, is going to be talking about applying to grad schools. And this kind of pertains to probably any program you're applying to. Even if you're applying to med schools or something, or law schools, a lot of these things are going to be pertinent. So this is sort of just the tips, tips to move forward with a really strong application, no matter what direction you go in. If there's questions, yeah, Diana.
Before you get started with that, I just wanted to mention one other thing that I think makes the HDFS PhD program unique. We have a really strong training program for instruction. So if you're interested in teaching at the university level, our students have the opportunity to start as teaching assistants, but then move into teaching their own courses in person, online, and really get some good experience under their belts before applying for jobs where they may be teaching. And talking to other professors about other programs, the level of training and guidance that people get teaching in our program is a lot stronger than in a lot of other programs. So if that's something that's interesting to you, please reach out. We're happy to let you know a little bit more about that. But I just wanted to share it since it's something that does make our program unique.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So if you do want to go into teaching, just if you think about down the line, like when you're applying for a job as a professor, you want to teach, at most PhD programs, you'd be able to say, I was a TA. And sometimes you can say, you know, it's very, very rarely, but sometimes you can say, I taught a class. I did as a PhD student. I got to teach one summer class. Our PhD students will teach classes more than once. They'll have, you know, sections of classes and multiple classes, so that their resume is pretty strong when they go into these teaching positions. They can say, I've taught multiple classes. I've got data from multiple teaching evaluations from students. I can show you I have a repeated pattern of quality teaching, and you're highly mentored in the process. So we are training you to be researchers, but we also really pump out some fantastic teachers. Some of you have had our grad students as your instructors, so you might know that. That's a good point. So a strong application. So, you know, as the grad coordinator, I've seen a lot of applications. So some of this might be kind of my personal focus, but I think a lot of this is, you know, all of the people that sit on our own applications committee would agree with what I'm about to say. When you're applying to a program, you really want to show that department that you are choosing them because you've really looked into the program. So when we get applications that are very generic, that are like, I really want to work with kids, I love kids, I worked with kids, I want to keep working with kids, it just doesn't feel like you need to come to our program. It's like, well, you could go anywhere with that. You know, why Utah State? So what I really think you need to do with all of your applications is spend some time on the web. Also, maybe talking to the grad coordinator or any faculty at that institution, and ask them some questions about the program so you can make sure that you know what you're getting into and that you can write your letter of intent, or whatever they call it at the university. We call it a letter of intent. Write that letter to be specific to that program. So things you can do, talk about your specific career goals. Don't just say, I want to work with kids, but I want to work with kids in what capacity. If you're like me and you didn't really know exactly what you wanted to be when you grow up, that's fine too. You can say, I don't exactly know what I want to do with it, but I'm interested in this because of this. So give us a little bit of specifics. If there's faculty at the in the department that you enjoy, that you look through their bios and you think, wow, that sounds really cool what they're doing, mention them by name. You can say, I'm interested in working with, you know, Dr. Diana Meader, Dr. Troy Becker, right? Use their names. You're not throwing their names around unfairly, right? You've done your research. You know that they are doing some cool things, and that's who you would like to be paired up with if you come to that institution. So it helps. It helps us know that you've looked through it and you've decided we are a good fit. If you can make connections with any of those people through email or through a face-to-face sit down, or I guess Zoom this year, try to do that. So you can contact Diana and say, Diana, you know, you mentioned something about your bullying prevention programs. Can you talk me through that a little bit? And, you know, you can sort of get to know her and her area better. And by doing that, that kind of lets you know, like, yeah, this is, you know, the kind of stuff that she's doing is the kind of stuff I'm interested in. And so ask lots of questions. We're more than happy to answer questions. That's a lot of what we do. In terms of just practical things, just know a little bit about the university you're going to, right? You can ask about things like tuition and tuition waivers or reimbursement. You can talk about the TA and RA, but get to know, the town a little bit. Is it really where you want to be that, for 5 years for a PhD or even for 2 years? So, we want you to be happy both academically, but also in your personal life and where you're at. So you can also ask us questions about that. So like, what is it like? Where do we live? All those questions we can help you with. So again, the faculty bio is really important. For a master's student, you will have a faculty mentor who works with you through your thesis, which is great. They really help a lot. You'll have a very close connection with that person. But remember, that's a 2-year degree, and you really don't only develop that relationship really closely often in your second year. For a PhD, you really are, it's almost like it's not a marriage, but it's a really long relationship. So I have a picture here of my advisor from Penn State, who I absolutely adore. When you work with this person as a PhD, you're really working with them for 5 years. And so, or 3 years postmasters. So this relationship is essential. Looking through the faculty bios, reaching out to faculty, asking about what is your research area? What are your projects? What kind of publications do you do? Get to know them a little bit, even before you apply. You'll have plenty of time to get to know them after you apply as well. You don't have to pick and you don't actually choose your major advisor your first semester. In fact, for PhD students, you have up to 1.5 years to make that decision. But that decision is a really important one because it definitely launches you into your field and into a good job. And so it's, that I can't emphasize that enough in the PhD. It's the human connection you have with the mentor.
And Beth, I would just add to that it goes both ways. You, of course, want to, impress them and let them know who you are and why you want to be part of the program. But you also want to make sure that you're a good fit with that person and that you want to spend that much time with that mentor. So it can be really useful in understanding what programs are going to be a good fit for you. And Beth, we have one question. How would you recommend we visit a university when in-person visiting is discouraged? What are some other ways we can sort of reach out and get to know the university?
Yeah, it's just a weird year. So I don't know. I think part of it would be to, look on the web. The virtual presence of the university is important. So look at the things like, their the awards that they've won and the things that they're proud of. I think that's important. You can talk to faculty. So like if you were to contact a faculty and say, I'm interested in your PhD program, can you tell me a little bit about your work? You can also say, tell me a little bit about the university. Is it a commuter campus? Are the students, living on campus? Is it party school? I mean, whatever it is that's important to you. But, those things that they can answer that. They're perfectly happy to be honest in their answers. But yeah, I think the web presence is the way to go. After that, I would say contact, within most universities, there's a link for like prospective students, contact them and the university will send you all their, information about like the stuff that they send, students when they come to visit. So they may have some kind of virtual tour that they can offer during COVID. I'm guessing most students have adapted or most universities have adapted to COVID. So yeah, there's really not a straight answer. I would say word of mouth, talking to the faculty that you call or some of the students that go there is a really good way to do it too. What do you think, Diana? Am I missing anything?
Something that I offer to prospective students when I hear from people is if they want to talk to my current graduate students, so they can get a sense of what things are like from a student perspective. And if they want to ask any questions about me as a mentor that they might not feel comfortable asking me to my face via Zoom, they can know what I'm like from another person's perspective. So that's something you can do too, is ask, would you be willing to put me in touch with your graduate students so I can see what working in your lab is like?
That's a really good idea. It's not spying on us. We're happy to do it. And it's like, if the grad students, I don't know, they'll be honest. I don't think they have nothing to hide, right? So they're probably good spies. Okay, so you will have to write this letter of intent or personal statement, right? And I mentioned you want to be very specific about the department or the university, the people in it, the kinds of things that are happening. I've got this list of like do's and don'ts because every year when we go through applications, there's a few that we just kind of groan like, oh no, they did it. And I thought, well, let's be fair. What are those things? What are the things that make the committee kind of eye roll or just do a heavy sigh? Some of these are minor, some of these are a little bit heavier. Okay, so, you know, a lot of people start the letter like, I've always wanted to be, you know, blah, blah, blah. It's like, if you're watching The Voice or American Idol, everyone tells you that they started singing when they were a year and a half and they always knew that they were going to be a singer, right? So we get a lot of these. We get a lot of people saying, always knew that I wanted to do this. I feel like that's interesting, but it's much more interesting to really tell us like how you got to this point. So tell us the narrative a little bit more about your work experience, or, you know, whatever it was that kind of gave you the passion, instead of telling us that you always knew you wanted to do it. Yeah, I've always known I wanted to be a developmental scientist since I was 4 years old. We just say, no, you didn't. It's not true. You didn't know that when you were 4. You know, sometimes the letters get very listy. It's like they've taken their resume and they have just repeated it in order on their resume. Like, I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this, and then I did this. And we're like, yeah, we know, we saw your resume. So I think, you know, when you're talking about things like an achievement or something you accomplished, again, the description of that is pretty important. Like, again, this is just stuff that I made up, but, you know, saying my strength and passion in writing is evidenced by my involvement in the Creative Writing Club. Okay, I was elected as president because, I mean, that tells us much more about you than you were the student of the month or you were the president of your writing club. Like, we just know a little bit more about you. Yeah, so again, do not make your, this is echoing from before, do not make your letter completely generic that you could send it to any university. Start with a template for sure, but make sure you're modifying sections of that letter specific to your program that you're going into. So you're really trying to demonstrate fit. You're trying to say, I'm a good fit for you and you're a good fit for me. If you have a letter that's like, I don't really know what I want to do, so I guess I'll stay in school. That's a little boring. Again, it's not a, doesn't kill the application, but it's just sort of like, show us that you're, maybe you don't know who you're going to be when you grow up, and maybe you really could have gotten a job, but decided, what the heck, I'll stay in school. We all know that that's the reality, but you know, you're here because you have some kind of intellectual enthusiasm or some kind of area of interest. And so tell us about that. Don't be super blah about why you're coming. Alternatively, two steps down here is do not be overly passionate. So I'll get to that in a second. Sometimes people make some claims in their application that demonstrate that they don't know a lot about the career steps. So they'll say, I really want to get the Master's of Science. I'm here for the MS. I love the MS because I can't wait to do clinical work. And we're like, it's not a clinical degree, right? So it kind of just shows you haven't done your homework about what the degree does. So, you know, do the research on the web and make sure you're familiar with the expectations of that, you know, the program, but also the careers that people go into with that. Okay, the overly passionate for passionate's sake, oh yeah. This is, we get a lot of this. It's like sweet, kind of little poetic touches. And it's nice. I mean, we don't want people to be completely boring, objective, you know, scientists, but poetry, being really passionate about, you know, saving the family, or, you know, older adults need us because they don't have anyone else. I mean, those statements are too strong, right? They're sort of overly passionate, which again makes us feel a little bit like, have you done your research? You know, do you know about older people? They're doing okay. So write scientifically. You can still show enthusiasm, but have that style of writing be academic. We love that you can do poetry, but it's not for your letter of intent. And the last one is, we love passion and we love students who absolutely are dying to get out there and do something important. And we don't want to like kill that spirit. At the same time, when you say, you know, I want to get a master's degree and I'm going to change the world, it's like, that's a big jump, you know? So what do you have in mind? So we're saying, like, if you want to make that statement because you truly believe that, talk about how the degree is going to give you certain skills and then what you're going to do with those skills to then make some, you know, changes that you're interested in. Saying that you're going to change the world, again, it seems like it's cool, but like, we just want a little more detail. Like, what are you thinking?
Also is just have people read it. If you know faculty in a different department that you're applying to who'd be willing to look at this, or a friend who's a graduate student who's been through this process, that's something that you can get some feedback on that can be really helpful. And we have a question from Casey. I've seen a lot of schools that have waived the GRE requirement for the upcoming year due to COVID. Does USU still ask for those scores?
Next slide. Can I go? Okay. Yeah. Not the next slide. I'll go to your answer and then I'll circle back to this one because it doesn't matter what order we go in. So we had a committee actually go out and look to see, and we contacted 20 of our sister institutions and asked about, are you waiving the GRE this year? Are you waiving the MAT? There are very few institutions that are waiving it. Most are doing what we are doing, which is we are still requiring it, but we're giving students flexibility. So if they have not been if they can't take the GRE because of closing of testing centers, they can let us know that. And there's ways that we can say, okay, we'll look at your application without those scores and we can sort of put you in hold until those testing centers open up. There's some, if there's some explanation about we're supposed to take a GRE training course and you weren't able to do that because of COVID and your score is a little bit low, let us know. So what we're doing is we're still requiring it, but we're being more flexible about the minimum in sort of saying this is a weird year. There's a lot of context that we don't know about with a student. And so we're being flexible, but we are still requiring it. Like I said, if you can't take it, that's a different story. Let us know because we're working with students in that capacity. And like I said, the other institutions that are around us geographically, they were all doing some, well, like I said, there was 2 that had waived it. And then I think out of 20, the rest of them were doing either no changes at all or doing what we were doing, which was being more flexible. It was a very good question. It's a weird year for sure. Let's get to the GRE real quick. So USU does have a 40 percentile minimum for the GRE, the verbal and the quantitative, but not the analytics. So it doesn't matter what you get on the analytics score, and a 40th percentile for the MAT. Again, it's a flexible year. So come talk to us if you're scoring below that. And we'll talk about some options that we can have. Okay, sorry, I want to go back to this real quick. Again, I won't go to, I know I'm trying to be respectful of your time. So just a couple things about letters of recommendation. If you're going to have somebody write you a letter, please ask them, will you write me a strong letter of recommendation? Because a mediocre letter doesn't gain you a whole lot. So, in that conversation, give them some information that helps them write you a good letter. You may not ever see what they write, but you might want to share your letter of intent. You might want to share your resume so they know a little bit about you. So they can fill in some gaps. If they've only known you for one class, you were a good student, they can say, but I also looked at their resume and I'm impressed by their engagement in the community or something like that. If you are applying to a lot of programs, I suggest organizing things for your letter writers. This is an example. So you might send this to your letter writers and say, I'm applying to USU. It's the Department of HDFS. I'm giving a hyperlink to that. I'm giving you some information about this program and the deadlines and how to submit the letter. Hyperlink to the department is important because sometimes we get letters that'll say like, I'm highly recommending Sarah to be in your Department of Psychology. And we're like, that's not our department. So helping them as much as you can. So in your application, if there's things that you're a little bit worried about, like you think, I just had that terrible first semester of college. That is not going to kill your application. You don't have to give us all the personal details. We're also, people go through things that we don't need to know about all the details, but it's absolutely fine to say, I recognize I have a lower GPA. And here's some evidence to show you that I'm a strong student. So, we don't take any one data point as really important over any other. So if you've got something that is not reflective of your abilities, then talk to us in the letter, like about what's going on. You can say, I'm not a great test taker. So let's say my GRE score isn't as high as I would like it to be, but my grades are really high. I've got a 3.8. Clearly I'm, dedicated to the academics and things like that. If you had, when we're looking at your degrees, if you've been to multiple institutions, we look back over your last 60 credits. If your GPA was really low, like your freshman year, but you have, your last 60 credits are really good, you're allowed to let us know, like, again, my my first semester grades, give me a GPA of like a 3.1, but if you take out those grades, I have a GPA of a 3.4. I mean, we clearly know like you just had a tough year, that's okay. And you're doing better since then. So anyway, you can discuss weaknesses. It doesn't make us feel like there's something wrong with you to have a weakness. We all have weaknesses. We all have things that we don't think make us a strong candidate. Is it going to be hard? Yeah, talk to our grad students, they'll tell you it's hard, but it's flexible. It's a nice way to spend your time. You've got 2 or 5 years to be really focused on things you're passionate about. And I always say, like, then you go and be a professor and you basically just stay in school forever. So if you like school, it's a really good way to spend your time. So, I mean, obviously I'm passionate about it. It's what I do for the department. And I'd love to talk to anybody individually with your own questions, concerns, etc. I'm sorry, I kept you a few minutes over.
One more question though, Beth. How does the application review process work? One committee for all grad degrees within the department, or separate review committees for different programs within HDFS?
Fabulous question. MFT has a completely different process. People in the outside of MFT do not even look at those applications. So that's entirely internal to marriage and family therapy. The Master of Science and the PhD are the same committee. But what happens is for a PhD student in particular, sometimes for a master's student, for a PhD student in particular, if they say, I really want to work, I'm going to use you again, Diana. I really want to work with Diana Meader. Then we will also invite Diana to come look at that application and say, what do you think? Is this a fit for you? The student clearly wants to work with you. Do you think it's a match? And so we open up the application to faculty if we feel like either there is a perfect match or pretty close match, and we kind of want the endorsement of the faculty member, or if there's a student that, doesn't specifically name a faculty member, then we might say, okay, let's call in some of the family relations faculty and see, like, do you guys think this person would be a good fit here? But for the most part, it's the same. The core committee is the same for both the MS and the PhD. The process as applications are due the 15th. There's always ones that trickle in after that, and that's okay. We're happy to have them. We don't care if they're a little bit late. We start looking at the applications before Christmas break. We meet after Christmas break. We start going through kind of the more intense process of, like, definite no, definite yes, and then let's really talk about those people in the middle. We spend a lot of time on it. So it takes months sometimes. Sometimes we really don't even have a decision until, February or March, because maybe we've made some offers, but some people haven't accepted them. And so the whole process is completed by April 15th, usually much before that. But April 15th is the hard and fast deadline. Usually it's before March 15th. And for some students, it's really even by February, you would know if you're accepted.
For the GRE, if I have to worry about getting it before December 15th or getting above the 40th percentile, I mean, is either one much more important? If you know what I mean?
The second one, we'd probably rather you can still fill the application and then shoot me or Renee an email and say, I'm scheduled to take the GRE on January 20th, something like that. And we'll just put your application on pause and then look for your scores after that. The only danger in doing that is if you wait too long and you decide you want to retake the exam because your scores are too low, you delay you're sort of shortening your timeline to be able to do that. But we would rather you have a higher score and take a couple more weeks to get prepared for that than to rush it and have a low score and then feel like you have to pay to retake it. Like, that just seems like we don't want you to spend that much money. So, yeah, but let us know if you're not going to have that piece of the application in, you won't be in the completed folder. You'll be in the incomplete folder. So if we knew that that's all that's missing, but that you're going to send it to us, we could start reviewing your application with everybody else and just add that in later.
Sweet, thank you.
How do you guys feel about being in grad school and having a job? That's something that I'm still a junior going into my senior year soon, so I'm not going to be going to grad school until next year, in a year and a half. But I'm trying to plan ahead, and I'm wondering what you would suggest. Is it better to like try to plan ahead so that you don't have to be working and going to school? Or do you think it's good to kind of have a balance so you can be getting experience while going to school? Like, what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's a great one. So we do have the assistantships that we pay students on, and I'd say many of our students use that as their job. So they're only working 20 hours a week, but again, they're getting paid fairly high, you know, I mean, not high, but $19 is pretty decent. So they're, so most of the students use that as their job. That being said, there are definitely students that work. I have one master's student right now that's working 30 hours a week at the DDE Center, which is the childcare center on campus. And she's also getting her master's degree. She's busy, she's stressed out, but she's doing it. She's doing a great job. So I think the PhD, we typically don't have people working extensively outside of the PhD. So they're almost always doing the assistantship approach. And again, the tuition's waived there. So that kind of frees up a little bit. The issue with working, I would say, is that our courses are set on a schedule that they're in 3-hour blocks, and they're offered, once a week. And so if your job prevented you from taking those classes, you're not going to be able to get that class again until maybe another 2 years. So it's a little bit of how flexible your job is. Some people have very flexible jobs. They can say to their employer, I need to take Tuesday off because I have 2 classes that day. That's fine. Then it could work pretty well. So it depends, which I hate that answer, but it kind of depends on the job, the intensity of the job. And I would say, again, if you were to say, I'm going to work at the grocery store for 10 hours a week, or you're going to do the assistantship with the department for 10 hours a week, do the assistantship with the department, because not only does it pay well, but it gives you experience in the area. But yeah, it's still up to individuals and families, right? You have to pay rent and take care of families and take care of lots of things. So it's hard to do it. It's really hard to do a full-time job and the master's or PhD. I don't know of any students that do that, but some combination of a part-time job can work.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Sorry, Melissa. How many applications are typically reviewed by the committee each year?
For the PhD, I feel like it's probably 10 to 15 maybe. And then for the master's, yeah, 15 to 20, a little bit more. You get a few more applications for the master's. So maybe, okay, I would say between 15 and 25 for the master's of science, and maybe between 10 and 15 for the PhD. And then the numbers we admit, which is probably your next question. It also depends a little bit on the assistantships and availability, but we have aimed to accept 5-ish PhD students in the last few years. That's been our goal. And then between probably 10 and 12 master's students. I don't know if that's the case this year because it depends a little bit on how many students are graduating, but that's what we've been doing.
And is the $19 an hour for the TA and RA positions for master's and PhD students?
I think it's slightly less for, I think it's 19 for master's and 20-ish for PhD. Again, Renee would probably know better than I, but they're close. It's a slightly higher pay grade for PhD, but only by like $1 or $2 an hour, I think. And we can definitely look that information up. So if you want to email me, whoever had that question, I can get you exact numbers.
My question is about the letters of recommendation. So I am working with Jenna Castanet right now. She's a PhD student, and she was my lecturer, and then I became her TA. And then I also have been doing research with her for 3 semesters now. So she knows me really well, and I just wondered, like, is it okay to ask a PhD student for a letter of recommendation, or is like that looks kind of down upon because they don't have their degree yet? Like, how do you look at letter of recommendations?
That's a good one. I don't think I've ever had that question before. We love Jenna. So that's a great, yeah. I guess what I would say is it's okay to have her write the letter. We know her well. She knows our program really well. She could totally give us, I think, a good, insight as to you, working with you. If there was another faculty member that you work with, like if you work with Jenna and Sean, I mean, Sean, he's a professor, so he may be able to write you a letter as well. I think generally we say like if 2 of your letters come from professors, then the 3rd one can be kind of whatever you want. I mean, maybe not your mom, because those are always really nice letters, but you know, it could be from an employer, or it could be a non-academic setting, could be, you know, Jenna. So yeah, I think that'd be great. I don't see a problem with that at all. I think she'd be, she knows the program well, so she knows what needs to go into it.
So just follow up on that, like if I'm also applying to other schools. So from their point of view, that would probably be better to have that be like my 3rd reference and have 2 professors on top of that.
I think I'd say the same for here too. I would still have 2 like academic, like 2 professors and Jenna for us, or yeah, for your other institutions too. And she can frame the letter in a way that she is a PhD candidate, but she can be very clear about her role as a mentor and what she did in that role, that the reader will know, like, oh, okay, she doesn't have her degree yet, but she's clearly, you know, done X amount of hours of work and mentorship with the students. So I don't see that as being a weak letter at other institutions either.
Okay, thank you so much.
You know, the only thing would be if you had all 3 letters that were written from grad students, then we would be like, weird. Like,
Yeah,
but
that makes sense.
I don't see a problem with that.
Thank you.
I was just going to add another option if you have gotten to know the grad student's mentor, because this might be the case for other people too, is you could, you know, let the faculty mentor know that they would appreciate the grad student's input in the letter. When I was a graduate student, I did this a lot because I was the one doing a lot of the supervision of the undergraduate students. And so we would kind of like half write the letter and then give it to the faculty member who would then add to that letter, because there were things that they didn't know about because they got to know us so much better as their direct supervisors. So that's an option too. And if you're applying to other schools, that might be helpful. And I hate to say this, but sometimes having the name of a well-known researcher as a letter writer can be helpful. So, you know, it doesn't hurt to get that faculty member to write the letter.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And Dr. Meader, with your comment about having like a well-known researcher or such, would I be encouraged not to get a letter of recommendation from certain faculty because they might be on the committee and have a conflict of interest? Is that an issue at all?
Don't worry about it. I think we all know each other quite well, and sometimes, I mean, we do things in those decisions where the person who's writing the letter, like if I wrote a letter for a student for our own program, you know, I just keep quiet a little bit during the discussion and kind of say like, listen, you guys know my input. You know, clearly I think this is a strong student. It doesn't get any more weight than any other letter. But I think if you've got a strong letter writer, submit that. I mean, have them write the letter. Don't worry too much about what happens on the inside. It may be that they excuse themselves or something for a vote, but I doubt it. I'm willing to bet that the application committee is going to be like, yeah, tell us more. You know, what should we know about the students? So,
yeah, I just wanted to make sure I wouldn't cause trouble. That is some unwritten rule or something.
No, it's just get the best letters you can get. You guys have been an awesome group. I appreciate it. I'm sorry we went over time, but I felt like it was really helpful to have, you know, like the back and forth and the interaction. Hopefully you got a lot out of it, but I hope this is kind of a starting point too for lots of future conversations, either, you know, questions about your specific application if you're trying to get in for this December, or if you're holding off and you've got some more time, keep the conversation going. So we are happy to answer questions. We're happy to put you in touch with certain faculty. We can dig around and find stuff again, like, you know, details about like what's the rate that you're getting paid and all that. If I don't know it off the top of my head, I know who to ask. So shoot me emails, set up phone calls. With COVID stuff, I'm actually doing better with phone calls right now than I am on email. I'm a little bit buried in email. So in your email, you're welcome to say, can we set up a time to talk, and we can chat on the phone. And sometimes that's it's a little more efficient. But.
And Renee did put in the chat that the rate for grad students and PhD for master's and PhD students.
What'd she say? Gotta look. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Oh, so it's, yeah. Okay. 18. So the $19 an hour was for masters, yeah, and 25 for PhD. Okay, good to know. Great. Okay. Well, let's just leave this as kind of a, you know, nice introductory meeting, and I hope to talk with lots of you individually. Really grateful you guys are looking into our program or programs in general. So just stay in touch. I'll let you finish it, Diana.
All right, thank you all so much. And I just put some email addresses that might be of interest to you. The third one who you haven't met is Renee Wamsley. She's our graduate coordinator of programs, and she knows the answers to all of the questions that I do not. She knows the answer to everything pretty much. So please feel free to reach out if you have more questions. We'd love to hear from you. And good luck with all of your graduate applications, GRE, etc. Have a good afternoon. See you later.